Hey, I'm Cory.
And I'm Laura, and today we're going to continue our series on trust.
Yes, and today's big idea is we can trust God even when it seems impossible.
Well, then I've got to ask you, Cory, what are some things you really want to do, but you feel like they might be impossible?
Well, I really want to win the Amazing Race. I've always wanted to pet a lion, and I want to finish an Ironman one day.
See, I don't think those things are impossible. They're all within reach. I thought the Ironman one was impossible, but I just signed up for my first one next year, so I think it's possible.
Well, then I guess I'm going to have to sign up too.
You guys are gonna love this. Today we're talking about love, what it looks like to make a big promise, and then what it also looks like when God makes mind-blowing promises and then keeps them. Watch this.
Where was Solomon's temple located? On the side of his head. Hi everyone, my name's Paige. So a few years back, I went with my family on a hike up a super huge mountain. It seemed impossible because it was huge, but we all encouraged each other and some fellow hikers encouraged us along the way too, and we made it to the top and it was gorgeous. So sometimes in our lives, there are things that can seem and feel impossible for us as people. But what is impossible for us is possible for God. When we know God, we are reminded of all of the ways that He is trustworthy, and that brings us to our big idea. We can trust God even when things seem impossible. So today we're going to continue to learn from the story of Abram from Genesis 15 verse 1 to 21. Abram journeyed from Canaan to Egypt to the Negev desert to Sodom. And a little later, the Lord spoke to him again. He said, well, let's read it from the Bible. Abram, do not be afraid. I am like a shield to you. I am your very great reward. But Abram was feeling a bit of doubt, which we all feel sometimes. Let's read what Abram said to God. Lord and King, what can you give me? I still don't have any children. My servant Eliezer comes from Damascus. When I die, he will get everything I own. Abram continued, you haven't given me any children. In Abram's day, children were a man's way of having a legacy. Having his own children was so important to Abram. Abram was getting pretty old and he still didn't have one child. Abram was losing hope in God's promise of an entire nation coming from himself. But then God spoke to Abram. You will have a son of your own. He will get everything you have. The Lord took Abram outside and said, look up at the sky. Count the stars if you can. Then he said to him, that's how many children will be born into your family. Imagine that. Think about all of the stars in the sky. No one can count them all. But God said Abram would have that many children. That was God's way of saying that he would make something that seemed impossible, possible. Then God told Abram that he is going to give him the land he is on. Again, Abram doubted, but God told him to bring a sacrifice of a young cow, a goat, a ram, a dove, and a pigeon. Abram did as God told him. He cut them in two and placed all of the halves of meat apart from each other. I know this is all kind of weird, but let's keep reading. As the sun was going down, Abram fell into a deep sleep. A thick and scary darkness covered him. Then the Lord said to him, you can be sure of what I am about to tell you. For 400 years, your family who comes after you will be strangers in another country. They will become slaves there and will be treated badly. But I will punish the nation that makes them slaves. After that, they will leave with many possessions. But you will die in peace. You will join the members of your family who have already died. And you will be buried when you are very old. Your children's grandchildren will come back here. All of a sudden, a burning torch and a fire pot filled with smoke appeared. They passed between the pieces of meat. How cool is that? That was the Lord making a covenant, an agreement between God and the people with Abram. God promised that Abram's children would get the land he was on. This would have seemed impossible as there were 10 people groups living on that land at the time. But Abram trusted God, and we can trust God even when things seem impossible. Well, thanks for spending time with me. My name is Paige. I had a blast, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cory, I'm so glad that nowadays we don't have to make an old covenant like Abram did back in that time. That would be horrible.
Yeah, that sounded pretty gruesome. The crazy thing is that if you broke that covenant, what happened to that animal could happen to you.
Yeah, that is pretty gruesome, but I think people would be more likely to keep their promises so that those horrible things wouldn't happen to them.
Yes, that's very true, and it's great to be reminded today that we can always trust God. God can do incredible things, even if people think it's impossible. So let's watch this video about Lize and how her dreams came true.
As a kid, I started acrobatics. Acrobatics became my life. And then I fell ill. Over a very short period of time, I started developing these incredible back spasms, shoulders, neck, overwhelming fatigue, and just constant pain. Whether I was moving or not, I was in pain. The only relief that we found was I would get cortisone shots directly into the spasms, 10 to 14, lining my spine and my neck. And that in itself was painful, but as an 11-year-old kid, I was begging for these cortisone shots. I believed that God wouldn't give me this talent and then allow me to fall into this pit of nothingness. I believed that God would let me dance and do my acrobatics again. By the grace of God, I was able to do another provincials competition and I qualified for nationals. That's when the illness just hit really hard. Time started running out. I couldn't train. I was in so much pain, and time came to where it was the day before. I still wasn't able to train. I had that moment of doubt of, should I withdraw? With my parents, they said, no, we're gonna pray. We're going to trust God. And the morning of the nationals, I woke up as supple as can be. I was able to do the strength tricks, the contortionists. I was able to do the splits. I was able to do everything as if I wasn't sick. It took a bit of time, and even though doctors said there's no cure for this, God did heal me fully and completely. I was able to go back to high school, and suddenly I wanted to do everything. I discovered a world of sports, so I started playing cricket. And then I went on to field hockey as well, and I kept playing that, and we came to Canada, and I was on the Ontario team. I played goalie, and we got to play, and we became national champions for a few years running. I just grabbed life with both hands. I was able to reach my last goal of qualifying for the national championships, and for that, I can only thank God. And today, I have the privilege of looking back at the medals that I got provincially, nationally, for acrobatics, for field hockey, and I know that I don't have any bragging rights to this. It's purely the grace of God, so whenever life runs away with me, I can always look back at those medals and know that it's a reminder that I can trust God even when things seem absolutely impossible.
Whoa, did you see those moves that Lize could do? I can't believe she could roll up into a ball with her bum on her head like that. That in itself seemed impossible.
Yeah, that looked crazy. And to think that she could do that all after being sick. God completely answered her prayers.
I agree, and you know what stands out to me even more? The fact that she trusted God, even when she felt like time might be running out.
And we saw that with Abram, right? God made all of these promises to him that he thought was impossible. But it's so important that we don't give up and hold on to those promises until they happen. So let's go into our small groups now and see what that looks like for you guys.